Welcome to Whole Team Eats Podcast, a 24/8 media production. Ever wonder who trains your favorite athlete? Join Tim Miller as he takes a look at the behind-the-scenes training of professional and collegiate athletes. Tim connects with trainers, athletes, and others in the sports community to share their stories. This podcast is dedicated to highlighting the work of athletes and trainers to inspire action and build community.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to an all-new episode of Whole Team Eats Podcast. This is Season 2, Episode 6. I'm your host, Tim Miller, and on this show, I sit down with Tim Stone of True Sport and Amanda Johansen of Athletes Unlimited. Growing up in Australia, Tim played lacrosse and developed a passion for sports and training. After receiving the opportunity to play in the United States, Tim decided to make the move. It was after his playing career that he became a physical therapist at True Sport, where he would eventually meet Amanda Johansen. In the inaugural season of Athletes Unlimited, Amanda was working back from an injury, and it was during this time that Tim was able to help Amanda get back to playing even faster than she had initially expected. On the show, we discussed the expansion of both True Sport and Athletes Unlimited. We dive into what effective communication looks like as both a physical therapist and a coach. Amanda talks about why she is passionate about supporting Morgan's message and why she is dedicating her season towards creating awareness for the organization and mental health in sports. It's my pleasure to introduce Tim Stone, Chief Operating Officer of True Sport, and Amanda Johansen of Athletes Unlimited. Amanda and Tim, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Tim.
So I know you guys have done some work together in the past. Obviously, Tim as a PT and performance specialist, and Amanda on the athlete side through Athletes Unlimited. So we want to talk about you guys and how you work together, but I want to take a step back and first, Tim, just kind of start with you. And if you could just tell our audience about your background, where you grew up, and how lacrosse and other sports played a role in where you are today.
Yeah, so I grew up in Perth, Western Australia, and I sort of, always played a bunch of sports, was really passionate about sports, and then all the way through high school, played lacrosse competitively, as competitively as you can in Australia. It's a pretty small kind of fringe sport, but then, coinciding with that also, I was really passionate about performance, training, and then that led me into the physical therapy world. So I actually began a physical therapy degree in Australia and had the opportunity a year into that to come to the US and play lacrosse in college. So kind of dropped that, came out to the US, played lacrosse here, and then did my undergrad at Salisbury University, and then moved into PT school and graduated from University of Maryland with a PT degree. And then got my first gig working at True Sports, and I've been here ever since.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, was True Sport the first place that you started right out of college? And how many years ago was that? Yeah,
so we in our last year of PT school, we do some longer term clinical rotations. So I did 3 of those in my final year, and I did start initially for a short stint with a different company, and then basically. Yoni Rosenblatt, who is the owner of True Sports. I had a great relationship with him all throughout grad school. He basically called me 2 months into that job and said, look, come back up to Maryland. I was currently in Florida at the time, and start working with lacrosse athletes. We've just started working with a ton of them in the Baltimore area. So I kind of dropped everything, came up. So I've been with True Sports for 5.5 years now.
Okay. Yeah, it seems like Baltimore and Maryland overall is just like a hotbed for lacrosse players. I know they have some good men's lacrosse programs as well as women's lacrosse programs, and it seems like the perfect spot to launch True Sport physical therapy and sports performance. So you talked about, is his name Yoni?
Yes, yeah, Yoni Rosenblatt, yep.
Okay, and did he go to school with you, or how did you guys get connected?
So he did graduate from the same school as me at University of Maryland, Baltimore. He's a little bit older than me, so he went through the program, and then he had sort of just started a business downtown in Baltimore, like where our school was, kind of close. And as I was going through PT school, we collaborated on some events. He was just starting out, so he didn't have a lot of staff to help him out in the community do some marketing. So he would lean on some of the students to kind of come out and work with the athletes, volunteer and kind of get our feet wet in real life situations with CrossFit athletes, with lacrosse athletes, football, soccer, all different kinds of opportunities. So I met him through that, and then just kept the relationship going. He was really like a mentor to me first, and then a boss, and he still is a mentor and a boss to me too.
And after what point did True Sport become what it is today? Like, when did I guess he launched it? He's the owner of True Sport. Yeah,
so we started in 2015, and then started at one clinic in the middle of Baltimore City in Fells Point, and it just sort of kept growing. It started drawing people from Baltimore County, which is a huge hub for lacrosse, but really people were traveling from all over Maryland. And we had a great network of physicians that we could rely on for steady referrals. And so we kind of built that clinic up to 5 or 6 full-time physical therapists, and then realized, like the space was really quite, small, and it wasn't really suited to like the field-based athletes. There wasn't like much turf in there. There wasn't, the ability to throw med balls at a wall or, squat and drop heavy weights and things like that. So we started looking to expand from there. And so basically every, year from there, we opened about 2 locations every 12 months until, where we are now. So it's been extremely fast outward growth. And then we're really looking at my role, my new role as COO, is to sort of like look back internally and kind of like systematize things and, make this place an awesome place to work, but also like make sure the patient experience is awesome all the way around. Sometimes when you're growing so fast, it's tough to manage that. So that's really our big goal moving forward, is just to make sure, the locations that we do have, are exceptional, and it's, super similar experience to go to each of our locations around Maryland.
Yeah, and I think that can be one of the most difficult things as a business scales, is just keeping that standard of, how you guys do things when you are expanding to different locations. You said you're expanding every 2 months. I think you mentioned before the show, is it up to 11 or 12 locations at this point?
Yeah, so we have, 13 locations
13.
In Maryland, and we opened 2 into Pennsylvania. So 2 of those are in Pennsylvania. So we have some new markets that we're looking at that basically just like split from Maryland. So north, south of Maryland, we're kind of looking to expand as well. So we're slowing that down a little bit for the next year or so. Like we don't really like say no to, plug and play great opportunities, but we're trying to like have a much more like internally focused model for the next couple of years.
Yeah, I can imagine it can be difficult to manage your schedule of what you do, because it seems like you have a dual role where you're trying to grow strategically on your end as a chief operating officer, but your day-to-day role is also as a PT and performance coach. So I know that can probably be difficult to delineate the 2 roles on a daily basis. So you work with a lot of lacrosse players, which is a natural fit for you with your background in lacrosse. I know you went to Salisbury, which is right in Maryland, but now you're also, you told me before the show, you work with a mix of different athletes. Can you describe what it's like working with athletes of different sports? And I know one in particular, I think his name's Jacorian Bennett from University of Maryland football. He's getting ready for the NFL draft. What does that process look like with him specifically, and all the other athletes that you deal with?
Yeah, so I mean, really, we try to like reverse engineer the therapy. So let's say an athlete comes in and they've just been referred to us from a physician. They're going to spend some time out of their sport, typically, if they come to see us. For the most part, if they're at that like elite level, and so it's really basic and at the start. And so when we're working with people from the start, it looks very similar amongst all sports, right? So it's just your basic things that you need to live your life to get back to. So that's, making sure, you got full range of motion, strength, you can walk normally, like all those kinds of arbitrary things that you take for granted that you don't have after a major injury. But as that process moves forward, it gets a little bit more and more specific towards the sport. And so that's where that reverse engineering process comes in. So I was, fortunate enough to work with Amanda, and this would probably be a good example. When I was working with her, we sort of put like a 3 or 4 week like timeline on what the rehab was going to look like. And so we just worked backwards from there, on a day-to-day process. So I knew that she needs to do like everything that she needs to do on the field, for a day or two at the minimum, like working with her every day to be able to step on the field. So, what does it look like for Amanda to play on the field as a lacrosse player, or a female lacrosse player, or a midfielder female lacrosse player that's plays the way Amanda does? And so we just reverse engineer. So that could be for a Jacorian Bennett as a DB playing football for Maryland. Like, what does he have to do on the field? Or it could be Amanda, it could be any type of athlete, soccer athlete, whatever that is. We just sort of like do a needs analysis, like what are the qualities that player needs to be successful on the field, and then you can assess where an athlete is currently and just fill the gaps until you get to that point.
Yeah, and we're talking about athletes in the top of their sports. I think is a perfect segue over to Amanda. So Amanda, you've obviously worked with Tim in some capacity when you were down playing in Maryland, and that's how you guys got connected. Unfortunately, at that period of time, I guess for a lot of Tim's patients, they come to him when they have some type of injury that they're trying to work back from. So how was your experience working from Tim? I know how we all got connected originally was when I was speaking with you, and you're speaking very highly of Tim and your experience with him. But how was that, and how did he help you get back into your respective sport?
So like right kind of at the end of COVID, after we haven't been doing like anything for so long, I went to like a US training weekend, and I was like so excited to finally get back to playing, and I was playing pretty well, and then I just like totally destroyed my ankle. I was like stepped on like a really little random play that happened, and I was and then I got up and I'm like, oh my God, like my ankle was literally massive, and that was like a couple of weeks before the Pro League was supposed to start. And it was like a super exciting time because it was the new Athletes Unlimited Pro League. It was year one. And after like almost 2 years of not really being able to do anything with my sport, I was like finally back, and then I got hurt. So I was like, I'm going to do like whatever I can possibly do to make sure that, I'll be able to play at some capacity. And my ankle ended up being like way worse than I thought. I was like, oh, I just twisted it, it's swollen. And then I went to the doctor, and they were basically like, you're out this summer, you're not playing. So I reached out to a few different people in the league, and somehow I ended up with Tim's contact, and I texted him, and I was just like, I sent him my like MRI, and I was like, this is what's happening. Like, can you please help me get on the field? And then on the other side of that, the league was like great with me. They were like, all right, well, you obviously aren't going to be cleared day one, so why don't you come on? You'll be a facilitator. You'll be able to, work with Tim. So every day I would like kind of coach a little bit at practice, and then I'd head over to PT, work with Tim. And he was able to get me back playing 3 weeks in, which was great. I got 2 full weeks in the league, or maybe I got 3. I don't really remember. But all I know is it was like an incredible PT experience that like I've never had in the past. And he was able to like allow me to get back on the field. And then from there, my career was able to be extended because I was able to play, which allowed me to sign my contract for year 2.
So just to take a step back, you were told that you weren't able to play because of your ankle, and Tim was able to get you back in 3 weeks. Have you dealt with other physical therapists, or is Tim one of the first that you've dealt with for an injury?
I've always had I've been really lucky with injury. I've had like little things in the past, like muscle stuff. So I haven't really dealt with PT much at all. If anything, it was like in college, I had some great physical therapists, but really it was just came down to like muscle and like tissue massages and things like that. I never actually had to be in like a day-to-day like rehab for an injury. So that was like my first experience. But before I got to Maryland, I had about a week and a half that I was working with another PT, but he like, and I feel like this is something that is familiar to like a lot of athletes. Like a lot of times physical therapists, they don't really want to like touch you or do anything that would like hurt you. It's more so like, this is your time to rest and ice. And it was that kind of rehab I was going through. But me being the type of like person, athlete I am, like I wanted more. I wanted to be fit and be ready and get back and do whatever it took. And Tim was somebody that was able to do that.
So Tim kind of understood what your goal was to get back healthy, number one, but two, as quickly as possible. And it sounds like Tim was obviously able to do that, but it was, it gave you the ability to play, number one, and then number two, extend your career by signing that next contract because you were able to play. And I know that was probably really important with Athletes Unlimited right after COVID being in its first year to have that exposure and to get back on the field as quickly as possible. I did want to I know we just heard Tim's backstory a little bit. Want to take a step back to you and your backstory, where you grew up and how I'm assuming lacrosse played a large role in where you are today as both an athlete and you were most recently a coach as well.
Yeah, so I grew up on Long Island, and lacrosse is obviously huge here, but I mainly was involved in other sports until I took lacrosse more seriously in high school. I was a big soccer player, basketball, I played baseball, hockey, really did everything. I'm one of four, and we're all close in age, and our lives are basically just go outside and play sports. And then from there in high school, or when I was a little bit younger, a coach had told me, like, you're really good at this sport, like you can take this far. And then from there, I joined a club program along with playing school sports. In high school, I was soccer, basketball, and lacrosse. And I really I would have played any sport at the next level. I loved it all. But I went with lacrosse. I committed to USC, which at the time was kind of unique because the program didn't exist. During the recruiting process, I found out about this new program. I'm like, that is so cool. I hate the cold weather. I love USC. So I decided to kind of, take a jump and commit there. Ended up being the best decision. 4 years at USC were amazing. We went from starting a program to finishing my senior year. We lost in overtime in the Elite Eight, so we finished as like a top 5 team. A really unique experience, I think, when compared to other people that I know and what they went through, as a Division I lacrosse player. But then from there, things just really aligned with lacrosse. Like the year I graduated was the first year of a women's professional league, which was at the time a UWLX. From there, when that folded, it was WPLL. That was awesome. My team won the championship the last year of it, and then COVID hit. So that kind of folded, and then from there it turned into Athletes Unlimited, which has just been an amazing experience. So I have never had a year where I wasn't able to play competitively, which has been really lucky. From right when I graduated, became pro, but that's due to all the people before me that fought for that. And now I am years out of college, and somehow I'm still playing, and I still love it. The past 4 or 5 years, I was college coach. I coached at Mount St. Mary's, USC, and Hofstra. I recently got out of coaching, but while playing and coaching and kind of all of that, I learned so much. And lacrosse has given me so much in this life and kind of molded who I am. And the fact that I'm still playing, and I just celebrated yesterday. It was 10 years from our first USC lacrosse game ever. And that's just crazy to me that it's been 10 years, because I still kind of feel like I don't know. I feel almost better, and my body feels better than I did when I was playing in college.
That's awesome. And to say that you were one of the first athletes to play at USC for women's lacrosse is pretty incredible as well. Do you feel like you were a part of what USC women's lacrosse has become today?
I hope so. I think that I really had a great class, and I think that's rare. You don't really see the way that we built the program. You don't really see anymore, because now there's the transfer portal, and people are able to get 5th years to start a program. So it's you're a new program, but everyone is very experienced. For us, it was truly your team is all freshmen, and you're playing your first game against Northwestern, which at the time was the reigning national champions. And it was a scary situation. And I think we grew so much from that. And I think that we had to learn leadership, and we had to build a foundation, and we had to create the team rules, and it was just so important what we were doing as the first class to kind of lead the program in that direction. And when I look and when I watch their games now, and I meet the team, and I go to alumni weekends, I'm super proud, because I feel they still hold on to most of the stuff that I feel we had a part in building.
Yeah, I feel like it has to give you some extra level of satisfaction to know that where that program is today wasn't possible without you and your class as freshmen, especially coming in. I'm sure it was a big learning curve to play Northwestern as the reigning national champions. But I think that's good for any young program to experience that early on. Just going to fast forward to your coaching career. So I thought your story was unique in the fact that you've had both sides as an athlete and as a coach. You've coached in a couple different locations, most recently Hofstra. But how was that transition from an athlete to a coach, and what did playing athletically in your sport, how did that help you transition to a coach?
I think for me, the way that I always played, I always tried to, it was like a high IQ way of lacrosse. Like I wasn't necessarily, like at every level I always played, like I did well, but I wasn't like the best shooter, the fastest person on the field. It was more so like I had a good game IQ and I knew what I needed to do. I remember all the plays, like on-field communication, things like that. And so that translated pretty well to being a coach. It was kind of seamless for me to take over that in that style and that role, because I felt like the way I played with lacrosse was more like being a leader on the team. So being a coach was very similar. The hardest thing for me as a coach is I'm not a loud person at all. Like I literally can't raise my voice. So on the sidelines, like just trying to be like, can anyone just hear what I'm saying right now? That was the hardest part. Besides that, like it was a pretty easy transition for me the way that I was a player into coaching. I felt like I can connect with the team really well just because I was still in it and I was still playing and going out and doing little individuals and actually being able to, play defense on some of the attackers or vice versa. It was a good experience.
Yeah, and you say connect, and obviously, you might not be able to raise your voice, but you're able to effectively communicate what you want in your athletes. And I think that comes back to Tim when we talk about effective communication. You need to be on the same page, relaying like why you're doing what you're doing with specific athletes, how you're helping them, how you're helping treat them to get back in their sports. What role does effective communication play with your athletes, Tim?
Yeah, I mean, the first probably piece to that is in terms of communication is just building like rapport and trust. And so in Amanda's case, like she's traveling to a different state, has already had like not such a great experience with the rehab process. And so there wasn't really like a super optimistic outlook based on like her imaging and things like that. And, when she came in and I had seen all that sort of those things, I was like, I think she was more shocked to hear that I was optimistic about it and getting her back quickly than she was, just because I've seen and dealt with it and done it like somewhat similar to before in a similar scenario. And so I think that communication piece, like providing confidence in the athlete, just goes a long way in terms of like starting the process. And then just throughout, we had a plan every day to a T what goes into the session. And we were able to plan around her practices or her role as a facilitator initially. And just having like a checklist of like, we're going to go 3 or 4 days this week or 5 days this week. Day 1 is going to be focused on these 3 things. And then day 2 this week is going to be focused on these 3 things. And so programming it out there so that the athlete can, or Amanda in this case, can see the trajectory moving forward and like see all the things we're doing to get back to where she needs to go. We were this story kind of sounds like amazing, but a lot of it was pretty lucky, I think. We create that perfect plan a lot of the time for athletes. And in this case, it went better than expected with that plan. So we got really, lucky, and a lot of credit goes to Amanda in terms of like the way that she committed to the process of getting herself to where she needed to be. But a lot of times, you have this plan laid out and you've communicated really well, and there's all these bumps in the roads and it doesn't go quite the way that you want it. This is just one of those like awesome cases where like I feel like everything you do in your training and like everything you've built in terms of like rapport and like in the field and with athlete like in front of you just went as smooth as possible. And it was an awesome experience.
Yeah, and I think you can only do so much as a PT, outlining the plan, clearly communicating to the athlete, like Amanda in this case. But a lot of it falls on the athlete to make sure they're doing as much as they can to get back, on the field. In Amanda's case, playing lacrosse. Do you work with a lot of other Athletes Unlimited athletes, or was Amanda just one of the few?
Yeah, so I was actually, the way that we originally got hooked up was the inaugural season. I had a connection with one of the athletes that put me in touch with the league operators, and they still hadn't quite found a medical provider for the league. And I work with like a lot of women's lacrosse players. I'm really like passionate about women's lacrosse game. I have daughters myself. Like I hope they are able to play as they grow up. And so, at that time, for sure, it was like the largest population of what I worked with. And, working in the private sector, you don't get that opportunity to work on a sideline experience, like prepping players before and after a game. And so when I found out about this league, I was super excited about trying to put my name out there and get involved with it. I thought I was going to just have a shot at like helping them in a small role, but ended up landing the gig as the like head medical provider. So coordinated any sort of like emergency medical personnel, like sports med physicians. We coordinated all of the athlete physicals, and then I subcontracted out all the athletic training stuff. And so it was a wild experience doing that for the first time. But it came off really well, and it was a really successful season doing it. So yeah, I mean, we've had like that was like my first experience in that situation, but it worked really well. So we got to work with, which was awesome for me, and, a huge passion of mine, like the best of the best female lacrosse players, and really, probably in my experience, the best women's athletes or female athletes that I've worked with, period. So it was really cool.
Yeah. And I'm assuming your growth trajectory of True Sport is kind of go hand in hand with the growth trajectory of Athletes Unlimited. As you guys grow, you're going to be able to help more and more Athletes Unlimited. And Amanda, I guess, where do you see Athletes Unlimited 5 years from now?
I just feel like I see it continuing to grow. I'm not sure what that exactly means, just because of the way the organization is. It's like numerous female sports. So they have lacrosse, they have basketball, they have volleyball, and they have softball. And then right now everything is like a 5-week league. And along with that, some of the other sports have like championship type of leagues as well. So like softball, I think they technically have like 2 seasons. So I guess just speaking on lacrosse, what I can really see is it expanding to more than just those 5 weeks. But just the style and then the way that they've created this, and the support that the athletes get, and everything has just been pretty incredible and really an awesome experience. And I feel like I hear nothing but, positives coming from this. So I can only see it getting bigger from here.
Yeah. And one of the neat things that, we spoke about before the show was I have the Give Lively Foundation would make a grant equal to 50% of the athlete's end of season bonus to a nonprofit of their choice. And in this case, I believe you dedicated, is that the right term? Dedicated your season to Morgan's Message. Could you tell us about Morgan's Message, what that is, how you got involved, and why you're passionate about it?
Yeah, so this was my second season playing for Morgan's Message. Morgan's Message is an amazing organization. I reached out to Donna. So she's the mother of Morgan. And Morgan unfortunately passed by suicide, and she was a lacrosse player at Duke. And I never met her, but she just seemed like somebody that I could like really relate to as an athlete, and I'm sure a lot of other people can. Super competitive, high academic, just overall, just seemed like somebody that would be like a really great friend of mine. And her story just like really touched me. And I think too, as somebody that was a coach at the time, and just seeing what, I think the times have like changed in the past few years, where people are more open to speaking about mental health, which I think is really important. But I think I started as a coach to learn more. I'm like, wow, like there's so many people that I'm working with and I'm coaching that they're going through all of this stuff. And I just, I wanted to make sure that like I can learn more, but also that like they had somebody to talk to and like thirdly, to find a way to like kind of just connect everyone and be like, this is a safe space. I'm not a professional, but I can have contacts. I just wanted to do whatever I could as a coach and as a player to kind of just bring to light being able to speak openly about mental health. And that's what Morgan's Message does. And I'm sure you've probably heard of it in other platforms because it's just been growing like crazy recently. I think it's touched a lot of people, a lot of programs, and they just do a lot of really great things with being able to, create that space so that people can talk about mental health and hopefully save lives along with that. So as a player that plays for an organization, the Pro League Athletes Unlimited is so awesome. They match your bonus, and again, that gets donated. And then you also, as a player, are able to use your platform and the Go Lively platform to get donations throughout the year. So like I said, I did Morgan's Message 2 years in a row. I plan on also having to be my organization this third year. And I have nothing but good things to say about Morgan's Message.
Yeah, I think it's neat to have a nonprofit that pools resources to help student athletes and athletes in general with mental health. As I was educating myself a little bit about Morgan's Message and the foundation itself, I was reading a little bit about Morgan and her backstory, and I think part of where she started to struggle was after a major injury, and that kind of comes back into Tim in your world when you're dealing with athletes, Tim, who are injured. Not only are you helping kind of program or reverse engineer, as you said, like a effective plan to get them back in their sport, but there has to be some part of you that's like a coach in a way to help them through a difficult situation where they're not used to being injured, and everybody sees an injury as a huge setback. And for some people, it can be tough to get back on the the playing field after a sport or after an injury. What is it like dealing with athletes after they're injured and kind of coaching them just through the mental process of it?
Yeah, it is a huge portion of rehab, and we have a number of support like networks that we use that we utilize for athletes that are going through different sort of injuries. I think as an athlete and previously an athlete and as an athlete that's missed time and been hurt, and you think of yourself, or even just ending my college career, you think of yourself and your identity is like solely wrapped up in this like notion that like I am an athlete. And so when that gets taken away from you for 3 weeks or for, in some cases a year, or, can be longer, it's pretty heartbreaking. And I don't think it gets a ton of it doesn't get a ton of like emphasis in society, because as a society, we really feel like playing sports is like a privilege. Playing at the top level is a privilege. Or if you're a pro athlete, like, you're getting a boatload of money to do this sort of thing. But for a lot of people, like they've invested, the best part of their entire life to get to where they are. And when somebody tells them that something that's quite out of their control might, jeopardize that, or it might end their career before they're ready to do that. I mean, it is heartbreaking, and we see it a lot. It's a massive part of what we do in the rehab portion of the therapy. I'm not qualified to deal with like some of the more like, I would say, like pathological, like medical conditions regarding that. And so we outsource to different resources there. But it certainly is like, whether it's just giving an athlete some confidence or connecting them with another athlete that's been through something similar, or just trying to like, be a soundboard or listen to them, while they go through that process. It's been really interesting, and something, I like to educate myself on a lot is, how we can integrate the mental aspect of not just performance, but just, how being, how an athlete's like mindset and like having just a base level of sound mental health can really springboard them to be a better athlete and perform at a better clip as well. So yeah, it's a huge part of it.
Yeah, and I think it's something that a lot of, whether it's a physical therapist or just athletes helping other athletes, it's something that a lot of folks are putting a lot of emphasis on, the mental health. And we've seen that not just in lacrosse, but all sports, right? Even the NFL. And selfishly, as an Eagles fan, I'll bring up one of the Eagles, but Lane Johnson, he was one who struggled with mental health a year ago, and just having the courage to come out and say, "Hey, I'm struggling with this at the time," and it can be really helpful to just let other people know what you're dealing with, and that way you can get the help that you need. Tim, I wanted to just circle back and kind of starting to wrap up here. The expansion. So you now have 13 locations. You now have 2 in Pennsylvania. Where do you see True Sport 5 years from now, and where do you see yourself as part of that expansion plan moving forward?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, like right now we're putting in tons of different systematic processes. So we're trying to get everything within the company, like from an operational standpoint, to be very consistent and repeatable and clean and easy for people to follow on. So there's a lot of things that we're doing in terms of adding consistency to True Sports. In terms of a growth, we're looking in different markets of this PT rehab and sports performance world. So we've made a couple steps in that direction already. So one piece is that our only revenue generators previous to 22 were really was just rehab and insurance-based rehab for the most part. We've added a full-time strength and conditioning or sports performance wing to our business, and so we've started doing that in Maryland, and basically leveraging our relationships that we've and reputation that we've built in Maryland to get our athletes the same experience that they've had from a rehab perspective in terms of the quality. And then just applying that into the performance world. So we have an awesome strength coach, Stephen Yorkman, and he does a great job with all of our high school, college, and pro athletes. And then the other thing that we're doing, which is really exciting, that we're getting ready to launch, is a continuing education platform. So we've now had a great experience working with athletes at all different levels from all walks of life and different sports. And our therapists have been awesome helping them, but have also developed this, really wide range of niches and skills and really practical skills. And so what we feel like in our industry, there's quite a lack of education resources for the practical application of sports-specific physical therapy. And so our goal this year, and we've partnered with an online platform where we're starting to produce these continuing education courses for other therapists around the country and other health professionals or other performance coaches to sign up and take, mostly online, some in person, but to really learn, what is the True Sports way of treating an athlete. And then that might be specifically how do you treat an ankle sprain? For example, in Amanda's case, or how do we treat an ankle sprain? But also we're looking at adding content how do you develop your niche within your community? As a private sports PT, or what are the soft skills of we talked about, communication, getting buy-in and gaining trust with an athlete? What are the touch points on how you can be the best, not only clinician, but just the best sports physical therapist in general? So that's a huge undergoing that we're excited to get going and launch in 2023. And so those would be the main key points of where we are going in the next few years. I'm not 100% sure on a 5-year outlook, longer term outlook. I think we'll see where the healthcare industry kind of takes us. We're really have always been a patient centered business, and so we're never going to change that. And so that can sometimes make us slightly less innovative in the space of moving things forward, because I think sometimes that comes at the cost of just giving really freaking good PT to our patients. And so if we can continue to just produce the best sports PTs, educate the best sports PTs, and continue to just grow at what we're really, really good at the crux, I think that's our main goal for 5 years down the road.
Yeah, I think the quality of the physical therapy itself is always the most important thing, and you just need to be strategic of having that same standard across the board with all of your locations as you expand. Whether that's only in 2 states now, but if you expand it across the nation, obviously your education for other PTs is going to be something on a national scale, which is really interesting to hear, and we'll definitely follow that as that goes in. And I know it's just 2023. We have a lot of ambitious goals for 2023, but we should hopefully see you guys all across the U.S. in 5 years from now. And then Amanda, for you, just to wrap up, where do you see yourself as a coach, as an athlete? And it doesn't even have to be the next 5 years, but like, what is your goal before you're done your playing career?
That's a great question. It's been hard for me because like I was almost ready. I've always said that like when I feel like I'm not getting better or like I'm not going to go out there and like make an impact, like I'll feel okay like calling it quits. And I for some reason I like thought it was going to be like that this summer. I was like, all right, this is probably going to be my last season. I kind of had like some lingering injuries a little bit, and but then I played and like I just didn't feel like I was done yet. I still feel like I could still, do well and continue to get better. So whenever that time comes where I'm like, all right, I'm getting old and I'm not getting better anymore, I'll probably start to transition out of my sport. But it's hard for me to even think about that just because it's been my whole life. I think it's helped a little bit. Almost getting out of coaching, it's the whole identity thing. It's like I'm kind of finding my way away from the sport a little bit just because I've been involved in it so much my whole life. So now doing something different, but then also being able to play, it almost makes playing like refreshing again. Not that I ever didn't love it. Like I think I'm that like odd person that has just like, I've never been like tired of it. Like I'd play a game every single day of my life if I could. But I think in the next few years, and what I've realized recently is I have to go about things in like a smarter way. And that's why I got a degree recently in sports science. And then I always like pick Tim's brain whenever I was with him. And like, I just want to find out ways where like I can be as healthy as possible in my sport and train, but not overtrain, and just find out the ways to just continue to be a good midfielder as I get older. So I don't know, this could be my last year. I could go on for 5 more years. I literally have no idea. But my goal until that time comes is just to train smart and be the best that I can on and off the field.
Yeah. And you do have several certifications as well?
Yeah, so while I was a coach, just because I wasn't sure what my end goal would be when I was done, I continued to get degrees. So I have a few masters. I have sports management. I have sports science. I have my MBA. I am a certified sports nutritionist. And I'm in pharmaceuticals right now. So I've had a lot of random.
Just a few degrees.
just a few. Well, it sounds like you've got a great trajectory out of your playing career whenever that time does come. And I think it's hard to put a date on exactly when it's going to happen. For most athletes, it's hard to let go, but it's usually just a gut feeling. You'll know when it's right. And when that time comes, you'll be, happy with your decision, hopefully. We'll certainly follow both of you, Amanda playing and Tim, your expansion of True Sport along the way. So just want to thank you both for joining us. Once again, Tim Stone, Chief Operating Officer of True Sport, and Amanda Johansen of Athletes Unlimited. It was great hearing both your stories, and we'll be following you for sure.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tim.